You may have realized that being healthy feels different than it did in the past now that you're over 50. If you want to maximize your health potential but don't have time to read through overwhelming pages of Google links, this is the show for you. Welcome to Healthy Tips After 50. We love doing the research, finding solutions, talking to health experts, and learning what works and what doesn't. Now, your host. She spent the last 25 years dedicated to feeling her best and is here to share her best findings with you, Susan Rosen.
Hello, everyone. This is your host, Susan Rosen, and my guest today is someone who, if we hadn't cut it off, we would have still been talking just about various different things. We got along so well. Anyways, my guest is Don Moxley, and welcome, Don. And why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about
Thanks,
yourself?
Susan. Well, I'm excited to be here and get to know your tribe a bit. Again, my name's Don Moxley. To give you a little bit of background, I'm trained as an exercise physiologist. I did my graduate work back in the early 80s out of Ohio State. And for about 25 of the last 35 years, I have worked as a college professor, either adjunct or assistant. But while I've been teaching the exercise sciences, I've also kept a foot either in industry with technology as it relates, and we'll talk more about it as we go, or I work with elite athlete populations. So in 2015, I actually left my last teaching job. I worked as a sports scientist back at Ohio State with the wrestling program there. Began studying this concept of recovery. It's expressed in a thing called heart rate variability, HRV, and was invited to join. Actually, I was invited to leave that position to go work in the cannabis industry, and learned all of a sudden started to learn a lot about cannabis, cannabinoids, how they work, and then that led me to the work I'm doing now with Longevity Labs. So Longevity Labs is all about that longevity. We're looking at human performance, but not your ability to beat someone in the game or do something like that, but rather how do you beat Mother Nature and live a long, healthy life? And the concepts just interlock. So whether I'm doing a lecture on what does it take to win a national title in wrestling, or whether I'm talking to that person's grandparents on how can you extend your health span to meet your lifespan, the concepts are very similar. We'll talk about that as we go. So that's how I wound up here working with Longevity Labs. And now I do a lot of work like this, talking about our product, and particularly one called Spermidine Life. But and then how does that work in the cell, and how do these all things go there? So that's kind of a little bit about myself.
Okay, interesting. So what is spermidine? Is it for a particular problem, or is it kind of like the whole body?
It's a molecule that so you're familiar with blue zones, the 5 areas around the world where people routinely live to 90 and 100 years old.
I was going to say the old people, yeah.
Well, and it's old people that thrive.
Thrive, yeah. I'm just...
Yeah, our challenge, Susan, is the average American has a lifespan of 73 years on average.
Okay.
So that's the number of days you're breathing. Okay. But the challenge is we have a health span of 62 years, which means for 62 of those 73, you're not in a hospital, you're not interfacing with the healthcare system. But on the average, most Americans really begin significant involvement with our healthcare system at about the age 62. So we have roughly 11 years of life that frankly is not optimized. I don't know about you, and it's been funny when I was talking about athletics and longevity. And in athletics, there's usually a goal. We're trying to win something. We're trying to achieve something. Well, in longevity, the goal is great life. And I describe it as we spend the first third of our life learning in school, developing. We spend the second third of our life serving others, whether it's in work or a family or raising a family. But then, my daughter, my wife and I have a daughter who 2 years ago moved out and took a coaching job, and we knew she wasn't coming home. And I looked at my wife and I said, okay, well, we're officially third now. We're done raising our kids. So what are we going to do? Well, it's that third is your third. It's for the first time in your life, it's about you. Um, and I don't know about you, Susan, but I do not want to spend the end of my life attached to tubes in a hospital bed, things like that. I tell a story a lot of times that I've coached amazing athletes, national champions, Olympic medalists, Olympic champions. I'm my favorite coaching job ever was my daughter's 8th grade field hockey team. Without a doubt, my most favorite coaching. I want to coach my grandkids, and I want to coach my great grandkids. I want to be, and 5 years ago, almost 6 years ago now, my nephew. I'm an old wrestler. My sport was wrestling, and I wound up being pretty good at it. But my nephew qualified for the Florida State High School Wrestling Tournament, and my nephew's a big kid. He's my size, 6 feet tall, 280, 290 pounds. Wow. And he's getting ready for the tournament. And I got to go down and work out with him at 55 years old. And I was still pretty good. I was better than him that first day. The second day, Susan, you could have beaten me. The first day I was good. The second day I was not. So it was an interesting look about preserving ability, but also the importance of investing. That just happened to be my test. Susan, I want to be that crazy wrestling coach at 80 years old that's still teaching, that's still able to go in and I don't see myself competing. But I see myself continuing to teach and stay engaged. And you can't do that. When you're hooked to a tube.
No, it's kind of hard.
And so, longevity is funny that way. So, very much so. I'll take a step back. We talked about blue zones, and I don't know if you've talked about this on your podcast. I haven't heard you talk about it. But there's a term that we refer to in cellular medicine that's called autophagy or autophagy. It's pronounced both ways. And it's an internal cellular cleaning process. Now, they just gave a Nobel Prize in 2016. So this is relatively recently. They gave a Nobel Prize to a Japanese researcher who described autophagy and the genetic components to it. Well, the founder of Longevity Labs, his name's Dr. Frank Medeo at the University of Graz in Austria, was doing work with this molecule that's called spermidine. And he was using spermidine to treat what's called senescent cells. And these are cells that have stopped functioning correctly. Well, you put spermidine with these cells, the cells would transform. Autophagy would upregulate, and these cells would return to functionality. So this was one of the first indications that, this spermidine thing is interesting. We've known about the molecule for hundreds and hundreds of years. The guy that invented the microscope, Anton van Leeuwenhoek, he was a textile dealer in Belgium, and he invented the microscope to count threads in silk. Well, this was the first time we ever looked at things that you couldn't see with the human eye. And we found bacteria. Well, he's obviously a freak because it didn't take him long to where he had semen and he was looking at semen. So imagine what would have happened if we gave a microscope to a woman instead of a man.
Not that.
We'd have been a lot further along than we are now.
But, probably.
Yeah. But anyway.
It is what it is.
He identified these crystalline structures in semen. They didn't name them for another 200 years. Well, another group of Dutch researchers said, well, there's sperm in semen. Let's just call these molecules spermidine. And that's where the name came from. And we've known about them. In the 80s, we spent a lot of time looking at spermidine as it relates to disease. We were never able to get it connected. So it was 2016 when we really understood autophagy, that we see, oh, here's where spermidine comes into play. And what we know now is that spermidine declines with age. Spermidine content in the cells decline with age.
Okay.
So does autophagy. But when you raise spermidine levels, and it's through oral consumption of food, when you raise spermidine levels, spermidine goes up, autophagy goes up, longevity improves. And so people who live in blue zones have high spermidine diets. Their food is raised locally. Yeah. And one of the challenges that we have, and I'm assuming the majority of your audience is American, most of our food sources are industrially produced. Well, what we know is that industrial production of food tends to wash out some of the micronutrients. And in fact, we extract our spermidine from wheat germ, but we do it in Europe, in Graz. We cannot find wheat germ in the United States that we can extract spermidine from.
Wow.
So this is important. So that's kind of the full circle on the molecule. It's called a polyamine. You've probably heard of an amino acid. Well, if you take an amino acid and peel the acid part off of it, you have an amine. That's the nitrogen. So there's 3 nitrogens and 7 carbons and the accompanying hydrogens. But this is an important molecule in this autophagy process. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does.
So that's where that comes from.
Okay. So now you've found this thing. You guys have named it. You're looking at it in more detail. What next? Where is it? Is it something that if you feed it to people, they're going to feel better, or is it depends on what they have? Or
we have a lot of clinical data on this now. The product has been researched extensively. And if your listeners want to learn more, a couple places you can go. Number one, if you go to spermidinelife.us, that's the website that we sell things through. But there's another website out there that's called longevitybioresearch.org. And this is where we place all of the articles that we can find related to spermidine. So longevitybioresearch.org. But the other thing about that is that the first article that you'll see on that website is an article from Cell, and it's called Spermidine in Health and Disease. It's a review article that was published in Cell. And it's not so heavy that the layperson can't read this and understand it. I think there's a review at the beginning of it, but then the second part of the article goes deep.
Yeah, they usually put a summary or something.
Yeah, it's pretty good for most people. But when you look at what we saw in spermidine in health and disease, number one, people who consume spermidine-rich supplements, we see an improvement in autophagy. No two ways about it. Autophagy increases and improves, which, again, when you think about autophagy, as autophagy improves, inflammation drops. This is really important because what we know in our third, the thing that's going to probably take us out is one of 4 diseases: cancer, which are usually inflammation related; heart disease or cardiovascular disease, which is inflammation related; neurological problems like dementia or Parkinson's, which are inflammation related; and autophagy, lack of autophagy. So what did I say? An immune system. Your immune system, inflammation blocks your immune system, and autophagy is critical in the immune maintenance. So that's what you see in the clinical data that we have from studying spermidine in humans. Now, we've got some other articles coming out right now. We've got some other research as it relates to improved sleep. Spermidine, we've got a good sleep study.
That makes sense.
We have a study out of Berlin that individuals who consume spermidine stopped the development of dementia. Stopped it. We've not reversed it, but we stopped it. And again, so when we start to look at Alzheimer's, and if you think about Alzheimer's disease, it's from the development of plaque of tau proteins. Well, those proteins, when autophagy is upregulated, those proteins are typically digested because that's what happens with autophagy in the cell. There'll be that tau protein will be formed. It can't go anywhere. Well, autophagy encapsulates that protein and then digests it. So proteins are strings of amino acids. So when it digests it, those amino acids go back to the cell for refunctioning. And this is where autophagy is such a beneficial process in that. So again, when you look at that, so we have a good sleep study. We've got some stuff coming out on human reproduction. One of my challenges is, Susan, is this not making this sound like snake oil? Because there's so many areas that autophagy works at a cellular level. And so much of medicine happens at a little higher at an organ level. You have a cardiologist or a neurologist or a pulmonologist. Well, we're talking about cellular medicine here. We're talking about deep, a full organizational level below the organ. So you have cells, organs, human. We're talking about working at the cellular level. And it's been really exciting being part of a team that gets to do these kinds of things.
Oh, no kidding. No kidding. Yeah. So you're doing all this, everyone's doing all this work and coming up with all of these new interesting areas, right? And how it works. So how is it being applied now? I mean, is it something where people can go into a pharmacy and, either off the shelf or through just a prescription or something, get a hold of some of these things, or you can just walk in the store.
If you're in Germany or Austria, if you're in Germany or Austria, you can go into a pharmacy. If you're in this country, we don't have a pharmacy connection yet. So our e-commerce is where it happens. So again, spermidinelife.us, that's the best place to go learn about. Listen, you can go to Amazon. You'll see us there. Now, I'll warn you, with anything good, there always winds up being some other junk that comes along. So there has been the emergence in the last year of synthetic spermidine. This is coming out of China. One of the things we're very proud of is there's been over 100 human studies done using Spermidine Life as the product. In fact, we don't know of a human study that's been published that did not use Spermidine Life. We do not know of a study that's been done that's used synthetic spermidine. So be careful. I mean, there's definitely a buyer beware there. But
I hate to say this, but that's for vitamins and everything else in there, out in the world. All of these, they've replicated all of these things, and they don't do what the original does. And most of the time they do something negative. Or nothing. If they're lucky, they do nothing.
Yeah. There's a lot of that, isn't there?
Yes.
That's part of the challenge.
Oh my God. Yeah.
That's part of the challenge. So again, if you do go to Amazon, you'll see multiple products there. Again, it's fun for me. I've not seen another company with someone like me. And it tells me that they're not selling the science. It just tells me they're right. In fact, what's funny is I listen to other promotions. There is one other company that does a really good job. Don't get me wrong. They use a natural spermidine extract. They do a nice job.
Okay.
All the research that they mention is ours.
Well, good for them.
So
At
absolutely,
least
and good
it's
on them.
real
So
stuff, right?
right. Sorry, I'm nursing a little cough, so
Uh-oh.
that's the reason I'm working on it. But so that's where spermidine comes from. It's a natural
Uh-huh.
food extract.
Okay.
By the
What kind of
way,
food?
wheat germ comes right out of wheat germ in Europe,
Mm.
European wheat germ, which
Does it
is
have
very
any
different
wheat?
than
Does it have
American.
any, okay, does it have any real wheat in it?
Well, it's the germ of
Once
the
it's been,
it's
okay.
the germ of the seed, and frankly, there is a small amount of gluten. Okay,
Okay.
this is the challenge with wheat is the gluten. So
I
there's
know.
roughly a 1-to-1 ratio of gluten to spermidine. Now, let me put this in perspective. The Celiac Association says that you should keep your if you're a celiac patient, this is someone who's very allergic to gluten, they should keep their gluten consumption below 10 to 50 milligrams a day. A
Okay.
piece of bread is 1,500 milligrams, just to put it
Yeah.
in perspective.
Yep.
We have 1 to 3 milligrams. Okay. So the product, in fact, we have a lot of physicians around the country that will use one of the benefits of spermidine supplementation, and you'll read about
Mm-hmm.
this in Spermidine and Health and Disease, is there's an upregulation of what's called epithelial stem cell production. So
Mm-hmm.
your epithelial stem cells are the cells that make your skin, which become your hair, your nails. Most most of our customers tell us that 3 to 5 weeks after they started using spermidine, they notice their fingernails start growing like crazy.
Oh,
Um, so this is one of the benefits. Hair
yeah.
improves.
There.
Not
Uh-huh.
that my hair is a sign of that. But
Well,
well,
what you
the
got
epith
may be improved.
I'm doing okay.
Yeah.
But what we know is that the epithelial also create the lining of the gut. Those are the
Yes.
same cells that make that lining of the gut.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we have a lot of doctors that believe that when they start using spermidine and they improve that epithelial cell production, it tightens the junctions in the gut. So if there is a leaky gut situation they're dealing with,
Oh, interesting.
they're willing to trade the benefit of the spermidine for the
Yeah.
risk of the gluten.
Uh-huh.
So we have a lot of
Yeah.
docs doing that. Now, and again, you
Oh,
got to kick the
okay.
gluten out of your diet some other way.
Mm.
But that's it's a trade-off.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and a lot of it too, as you said, depends on how much it ends up being.
Exactly.
You
And
know,
again,
there
we're
aren't that
doing
many
three
people.
milligrams max.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I was
Um,
going to say there aren't that many people who are that allergic to it,
right. And
right?
if you
And there are
are,
some, mind
be
you.
careful. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
We,
Exactly. Yeah.
we've worked with a lot of people. If
Mm-hmm.
someone is very celiac or very gluten intolerant and they want to try it, just contact me. We'll figure out a way that you
Mm.
can try it. Or if you buy it and you can't use it, we've refunded. We've done this. Listen,
Yeah.
we're trying to help
Yeah.
you. We're not, I mean,
That's
so
right.
that's what we do.
Yeah. 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 No, no, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Yeah. Because it's, I mean, I don't do real well with gluten or with wheat, but it doesn't mean I don't, what's the right word? Cheat
Right.
and eat a
It's the way
bagel.
most people are.
Or, yeah. Now, there are some people who can't even go into a restaurant that's cooking stuff that has a lot of gluten in
Right.
it. Those
Right.
people might want to talk to their doctors before they start
Absolutely.
doing
My
this.
daughter and I walked into Costco last night and
Uh-huh.
I said, man, I tell you what, those Costco pizzas, I love it. But man, after I eat it, I feel awful. And I've just gotten to the point to where the pleasure of eating, it's not worth the price you pay for it afterwards. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, and you never know what it is in it that actually, because it
it's
could be the
it's the
cheese, it
gluten.
could be, oh, is it the gluten? Okay,
Oh, it's the
okay.
gluten. I
Yeah.
can eat the cheese right off the top without a problem, but when I eat the crust, it's
Ah,
that's what
okay,
throws me
it's a
off.
high gluten.
Oh,
Yeah.
most pizza crusts are. That's that gluten
Yes,
makes it
that's
sticky
right.
so they
Makes it,
can do
yeah,
that. Yeah.
yeah, chewy, the chewy ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Pretzels and
exactly.
pizza crusts and things like that.
Yeah, I know. I know. I have certain vitamins I take when I have pizza or, some
Well,
other bagels and stuff like that, and can't do it every day.
well, I think I told you my daughter moved out 2 years
Uh-huh.
ago, January 2nd.
Uh-huh.
My wife and I, we lived in Ohio. I grew up in Ohio, lived there for 60 years,
Uh-huh.
I guess 59 years. Well, my wife and I sold our house immediately. My daughter moved out January 2nd. The house was sold by January 21st.
Uh-huh.
And we moved into an RV. We moved into a fifth wheel. We've been traveling the country ever since.
Uh-huh.
And so when your space gets really tight, you got to be selective on what you put in there. So, and my wife is celiac too. So
Oh,
we've been able to create a
that's good,
very
actually. Yeah.
gluten-free environment in our
Uh-huh.
rig. So yeah, so again, so it's not until I walk into a Costco or something like that that I'm tempted.
Yeah, I know. I know. Exactly. Exactly. So, yes, I know the feeling. But anyways, okay. So then is the spermidine, is that the product that you guys create? And
Spermidine Life. Again,
yeah,
if you
is
go to
it
spermidinelife.com,
pills
uh,
or
it
powder,
so
or what is it?
it's a powder that we're able to distribute in either pills or sachets.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
so if you look at our entry level product, it's called Spermidine Life Extra. It's a 2 milligram a day. Susan, the European Union gave us permission to sell 1 milligram a day product when we started 3 years ago.
Oh, wow. Okay.
What we learned, most people need more than 1 milligram. Um, Most of the doctors we work with and most of the biohackers that we work with immediately went to 2 and 3 dosing at 2 or 3x.
Mhm.
Um, we saw that, and the research is starting to point this out too, that most people need, some people do fine with just one. I don't want to minimize that, but most
Yeah,
people need a
yeah.
little bit more. So when you go to our website, you'll see what's called Extra Plus. That's a 2 milligram a day product. It's 2 capsules once a day.
Okay. With
If
food,
we
without food?
also, it doesn't make a difference.
Okay. Okay. Well,
This
some
is the
things do.
half-life
So,
on, yeah, the half-life on this is very, very long.
oh, okay.
I typically mix mine up. I have an evening cocktail I take before I go to bed that has
Mm.
magnesium and things like that in it. I usually mix because that's when I do my cocktail. There's no
Uh-huh.
alcohol in it. It's just everything's all
No,
mixed
no,
up.
no. I understand. Yeah.
Um,
It's a
um,
energy or whatever, a
it
vitamin
just it
cocktail.
just that's when I put it in. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
But we don't know that there's a benefit whether you do it in the morning or night. In fact, we're pretty sure
Okay.
there's no difference. Now, if you go with a
With
higher
food,
dose,
without
so
food.
it doesn't make a difference.
Okay.
Last
Good.
meal, put it with your last meal if you're going to do something like that.
Okay.
We have a 3 milligram
Mm.
product that you'll see on our website that's called Ultra. Now, this comes in what's called a sachet. So we can't cram enough of our what's called Celvio complex to
Uh-huh.
get 3 milligrams into a capsule.
Mm.
So it's a sachet. You tear the top off it, mix it with water, and drink it. And we also have a 6 milligram product that's called Pro Plus. That
Wow.
30-day is only sold through physicians or practitioners that
Mm.
we work with.
Okay.
You can buy 10 days worth. We buy a 10-day package of our Pro, which is twice as big a sachet as the Ultra. You can buy that on our website as well. And I'll tell
Mm.
you what we'll do. Let's
Hmm.
create a code right now. We'll call it Rosen15.
Okay.
And anyone who listens who uses that code will get a 15% discount if they want to try it.
Okay. Wow. That'd be great. I wrote it down. Okay. Good.
I have to remember to send it to my e-commerce people. I've made that
Yeah.
mistake in the
Yeah.
past.
Well, you have a lot of time. I'll let you know. I have a
Yeah.
long list of videos that are already done that I haven't.
Okay.
And I, since we're recording this around the holidays, I will say to everyone, although they probably will know this before this goes up, that I didn't post one at all last week
Okay.
because I just went,
Okay.
you know what? I'm not doing it.
You
I'm
know what?
taking a week off
Sometimes in life you got
vacation.
to do that, right?
Yes, and it's very rare. It's very rare that I do that. So, yeah, I
No,
figured
good
the
for you.
holidays are a good excuse.
Good for you.
Yes, yes. And a friend of mine said, "Well, people are going to notice." I said, "Are you crazy? Nobody's going to notice." She goes, "No, you don't
People
understand.
notice,
People will
but
notice." I said, "Well, nobody ever tells me. I don't get
people
any
will notice,
feedback."
but they'll be very accepting.
That's probably
They'll be
true.
very accepting. That's what happens on that. So yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
I think
yeah,
so
if you
too.
go to
Anyways,
spermidinelife.us, put in
okay,
Rosen 15, you get a 15%
got it.
discount. Um, if people have questions, we have a great customer service team that
Oh,
you can
good.
address through the website. You can see it there.
Okay.
Ask questions, or if you want to get a hold of me,
Uh-huh.
I'm pretty easy to get a hold of. I'm on social media. LinkedIn is the best way to get me.
Okay.
Don Moxley on LinkedIn, all one word, Don Moxley, just search LinkedIn and pop up. Message me. If you give me a message that says, "Hey, the system put us together, you look like a nice person," I'll probably block you. But if you put in a message, "Heard you on Susan's podcast, I
Yeah, or
have a
healthy
question about
tips or
this,"
whatever. Yeah.
I'll accept it and we'll start talking. So that's not a
Okay.
problem.
Okay. It's a deal. That sounds
Very
good.
good.
Yeah. Great. So I know we've kind of wrapped up already, but is there anything else that you want to share or, that
We're
people
just,
should think about or look at or watch out for or
you know what? It's so fun working for a company that has a product that
uh-huh.
is mature and safe and
Mm-hmm.
effective
Mm-hmm.
and backed by just ridiculously good science. Our advisory board, I describe it as the Mount Rushmore of
Uh-huh.
longevity researchers worldwide.
Wow.
David Sinclair and Guido Kramer and Frank
Oh
Medeo
my
and Kata
God.
Simone, Harvard and
Yeah.
Oxford and
I'm
it is
impressed.
so fun for me
Yeah.
to be part of that team,
Oh
and be able
yeah.
to be the storyteller on this. I'm not the guy in the lab. I'm the guy that's got to translate what comes out of the lab.
Bingo.
And I love
Yeah.
that. So it's just fun being part of a good company and telling that story.
Uh-huh. Yeah. No, I think that's great. That's that really is. It
It's
it makes it easy to get up in the morning, huh?
it and Susan, I don't know about you, but I hope I'm able to do this every day I breathe on the face of this earth. I hope I it was funny. I'll tell you a little story to close off with. So
Uh-huh.
I was at Ohio State working as a sports scientist, doing some really groundbreaking work. And it was so much fun. And I left for multiple reasons, but I left to work in the cannabis business down in Florida.
Okay.
And so my wife and daughter were still living in Ohio. I'm living down in an apartment in Palm Beach, and I'm sitting there to myself saying, "What in the world just happened?" Because
Yeah.
I go from a job that I thought was my last job. I thought,
Yeah.
okay, I'm
That
set.
you
I'm set.
like.
I'm my alum. I was an alumnus. My daughter was an athlete there at the time.
Uh-huh.
And then all of a sudden, I described I was selling weed in Florida, and I'm like, what happened? And I sat back and I was listening to a podcast one day, and the podcast said, "Don't define yourself on what you've done. Develop a
Mm.
personal mission." And Susan, I
Okay.
sat back and I thought about that, and I wrote my personal mission as helping individuals understand the changes necessary to alleviate suffering and contribute to the betterment of well people.
Wow.
That's Don Moxley. That's what I do.
Yeah.
And I don't see a reason why I don't know how I'm going to exit this world. Um, I hope I'm 90 and walking along the edge of the Grand Canyon and I slip and I enjoy the ride on the way down. I hope. But wouldn't that be a fun way to go? The
Might
great
be.
the
I
the
don't know.
flight the flight
Except
was
for the
great.
30 seconds when you hit. Yeah.
Yeah, the ending was rough. But until then,
Hmm.
I it's so fun. Listen, they gave a Nobel Prize in 2016 to the researcher that described autophagy. There is so much more to learn. We don't know it all yet.
No, just
we're learning as we go.
Yeah.
And I'm so excited to continue to be part of that. I'm sure you are too.
Yeah.
And I just get to draw a paycheck from a really cool company, and that's force feeding me really good information and turning around and telling that story to people like you and your crew.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. That's so fabulous.
Thank you again for the opportunity.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming on. Thank you for approaching me.
It's not a problem.
So with that, I will close with what I usually do, which is that neither of us are doctors.
Nope.
And this is not to be seen as medical advice. And before you start doing anything with your health, be sure and talk to a health professional. And with that, I will say thank you very much. And I will see everybody next week.
This has been Healthy Tips After 50 with Susan Rosen. To stay on the cutting edge of the most effective health strategies, subscribe to this podcast and let us know what you thought of the show with a comment or like on iTunes. Visit healthytipsafter50.com for this episode's show notes, more resources, and free offers.